Okay, folks, here's my question for you today. Why doesn't sales training work? Why is it that somebody can sit through thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars of a quote unquote proven sales process, and yet they leave with absolutely no results? That's something I want to dive into a little bit more today. I'm Brian Gillette. This is the MSP Sales Podcast, and I'm very excited today because I have a guest that you're probably familiar with if you're in the channel at all. He is known for, I would say, accountability is one of his sort of superpowers. But of course, he's a salesperson, VP of sales, sold millions of dollars in managed services. You may falsely know him as my older brother, which he is not, although for today's purposes, he might as well be. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Gillette, so glad to have you.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much. And if people learn nothing else from this, it's that while I love you dearly, we are not related in any way, other than we both do the same, very similar things in the very similar space with very similar histories, but not related, not related.
Really. And the amount of times I tell, they go, you guys are brothers or whatever. And I go, no, we just happen to have the same last name and we both live in California. We both do this. They go,
people have been like, oh, I'm so excited you're speaking at that event. I'm like, that's not me. That's not me at all.
Right. Right. They always go, oh, are you brothers? No, we're not brothers. They go, okay. As if I'm hiding that we are.
Yeah,
like
it's a secret.
Anyway, if you're listening to us on audio, you don't even know that we look pretty similar, actually. And we're both sitting here wearing glasses. And anyway, Robert Gillette is the founder of the MSP Dojo. Mm-hmm. That's what you're doing right now, but you founded lots of things.
Yes, many of them I'm very excited about. Some of them I've never told anyone about ever again. That's the life of an entrepreneur, I guess, or as my wife calls me, a serial entrepreneur. So
a serial entrepreneur, right? AKA the guy who keeps starting things and then they die on the table and then you go start something else, right?
Yeah, and you go, well, and maybe I'll revive it someday, but I once had a blog called Practical Marriage with this idea that, a marriage is just like you maintain it, just like a vehicle. And man, let me tell you exactly, zero men cared about that at all. Like they all resonated with the ideas, but something like 75% of the marriage self-help market is women. So like my target demographic was way off.
Right. Right. Listen, I teased us a little bit with this question up top because you and I were talking the other day and we realized this would make probably a very good conversation that other people would want to hear. Why doesn't sales training work? Or even said another way, why is it that MSPs don't sell more? Why is that stuff happen?
Keep going. Let's dive into that a little more.
Well, here's what I want to do is I want, just for the context for the people who know, not as a plug, but so that they understand your perspective, explain like a little bit about what you've been doing for the last couple of years with MSPs.
Yeah. So I sold MSP for a long time with a local company in the San Francisco Bay Area, helped them grow from $10 to $30 million and then left in a huff. And tried to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. And then I did some coaching. I did some sales coaching. And it was the very similar problem that we're talking about is I would teach people what to do. I knew all the right answers. We'd walk them through it. I'd train them, and then I'd send them out into the world and they came back looking like they lost a fight, in a back alley. Yeah, emotionally, it was a disaster. And then other guys, I remember firing one of my first clients because I took him out to lunch and I said, hey man, for 3 weeks in a row, you have not done the thing I've told you to do. I'm going to give you 6 more weeks and then I'm going to have to let you go. And he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. And, not even zero results, zero activity. He just couldn't do it. And so I stopped taking his money against his wishes. He actually sent me a check and I sent it back. And it's like, I really struggled to understand that. And now I run the MSP Dojo, which is really focused on practice. It's like you've heard me say before, it's the raw head of broccoli of sales. It's like the smallest thing you can do to get substantially better. And even then people don't do it. It's 1 hour a week of practicing something someone has said to you before. It's a common sales objection.
Right.
It's the bread and butter of what we do. And I have people that pay me and never come. And I email them every week. And I'm like, hey, you didn't make it again. And they're like, yeah, sorry. I don't understand. Like, I'm certainly happy to have your money. But at some point I'm like, I'm going to cut you off because I don't understand the value you're getting. Right. And it just blows my mind.
Right. And yeah, What's interesting about this topic is oftentimes when we say why sales don't work, it's like MSPs are hearing this from other MSPs. This is like a peer-to-peer commiseration topic. But what's interesting here is that you and I both having sold managed services, but now being in the other seat of like the sensei, we're talking about, okay, why is it that that people train with me and they leave exactly the same is really what we're talking about. It's not that sales training doesn't work. It's that sales training can work. And we're trying to figure out how come sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Sales training doesn't work if you don't freaking do it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things I really want to understand, not just because it's something I wish I could fix, but there are lots of things in my life that I know I should do that I don't do. Look, I've got a kettlebell sitting behind me on the ground I haven't picked up in more weeks than I'm willing to admit. So it's not like I'm unfamiliar with the problem in general, but for this specific thing, I feel like there's so much riding on success. And we know people, you and I both know people that have hopped from program to program to program. And it's not that any of those programs are bad, but they get a bad rap after engaging with people that don't have success. And so it's just one of those things where I really want to get to the bottom of, and I don't know if we're probably not on this podcast, but it's just so interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we can do is dissect, like what I would love to do on this for the listener who's like, wait a minute, is that going to happen to me? Or is that what's happening to me? Or should I not invest in sales training? Is I would love to honestly just kind of redact some names and talk about some actual scenarios that are relatable, like things that we've both seen in the field, right?
Yeah.
And this can be a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of like the life of a coach. There is an interesting dynamic when you're a coach, because we're not player coaches. We're not selling alongside our clients the same services anymore. Like we're now just coaches. And so if you're a coach and you've got an athlete, for lack of a better term, if you've got a quarterback that's got tons of raw talent, but then never hits the gym and goes, man, how come I keep getting sacked? And how come I keep losing time? And how come I can't get these throws past 50 yards? It's like, what do you mean, how come? We know exactly how come, because there is a specific set of requirements for you in order to achieve success. And the better question is, why aren't you doing the thing that you know you're supposed to do? Is the bigger question. So, I mean, I know it's a massive question, but I'd love to hear some thoughts from you. What are some of the things that you have observed that might not be universal, but things that you've observed in some of your MSP clients that have sort of stood in their way?
Well, I actually have a semi-data driven, it's not great data, but so when people sign up for the MSP Dojo, you take a sales confidence assessment. You have the option to, it's not mandatory, but it's 10 questions like, when I walk into a sales meeting, I panic. 10 or 1. Like, yes, super panic. 1, no, never at all. And they just answer these questions. And 2 things are really interesting. 1, I ask you to take it again at 12 weeks. And like, I think somewhere around 60% never have. They just don't ever want to return to the quiz. And the 40% that have taken it, almost all of them score lower after 12 weeks of practice than higher. And so what I believe that communicates is that this is a long journey for people that either don't have the time, focus, energy, or desire to do a long-term thing. And so that's why I believe so many people, like almost every MSP pays for marketing. Almost every single one of them pays for new, hot, better leads. I think I interviewed 100 MSPs when I first started doing this, and 87% of them spent more than $2,000 a month on marketing. And I think that's because what they can do is they can give money to another person or company and expect an outcome. And then when that doesn't happen, there's someone else they can blame.
Right.
And I don't know if that's true, but it's my suspicion. It's we want to just have it be someone else's problem. Right.
If you've ever heard me talk, then you've heard me say a lot of these things before. But like, the question then I have in return to the CEO who says, I just don't have time. I don't have time to grow my MSP. I would argue, what is a better use of your time than growing your business? Like, for real. What do you think is a better use of your time? Is it closing tickets? Because if so, why are you in charge?
Mm-hmm.
You should hire somebody to run your business, and you should be an employee, because that's how you're acting, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to abdicate responsibilities to other people, that's what low-level employees do. They say, that's not my job, not my prob. That's what my
Mm-hmm.
manager's for. And if
Yeah.
that's your outlook on your business, then like I hate to sound blunt, but like maybe you shouldn't have a business.
You know, I think that's one of the reasons why I see so many MSPs under $1 million eventually merge with or sell to another MSP. The MSP I worked for had, I think, 3 or 4 of those mergers where it was a small company, really smart people that just got tired of the stuff of running a business. They just wanted to do the tech, and that's where their
Right.
passion was. And hey, it was a great deal for them. They got some good money. They got a secure job. They got to do what they wanted to do. So that's certainly an option for some people. But then you meet people that truly want to be entrepreneurs. Like, I definitely coached a client for a long time who was just under $1 million in revenue, had 5 employees working for him. And in the year or so they worked with me, 3 times they lost a client that put them into the red. And they were able to quickly, with guidance, scrape up the whatever it took for them to put in the activity. And they would put in a solid 2 to 6 weeks of sales prospecting activity. They would run a tight sales process. They would close a new client that covered that revenue gap. And then they'd take their foot off the pedal. And it's like, well, now I got to onboard them. Okay, well, now that the onboarding's done, well, hey, man, this account manager really needs a break. And, I really can't trust my people to do this or this. And he would get back into the business where he was comfortable, where he knew it. And
Right.
then he'd lose a client. Suddenly it's an emergency. And boy, he could figure out how to muster up and do the job. But it was just so inconsistent, and he couldn't find a way to do that full time.
Yes. It comes back to like the growth is uncomfortable. And so when sometimes I ask people the question, do you want to grow your business? And people think that's rhetorical, but it's not. Some businesses are not trying to grow, or some businesses are trying to keep their top line the same and grow their bottom line, which is a different kind of growth, right? Some businesses are trying to tool to be acquired, or they're tooling to pivot into a different segment or whatever. But when I ask the question, do you want to grow? I don't mean that facetiously. I'm saying, because in my mind, I understand what that means. And perhaps I should be clearer. Maybe I should ask that in a series of questions. Like the first question being, are you ready to be uncomfortable for the next 2 to 5 years? And maybe I should start with that question, because growth is uncomfortable. Everything that you want is just outside of your comfort zone. And the bigger your comfort zone gets, the farther you have to go to reach the edges of it, right? But once you get a client, and then you just go, I got one client, now I'm going to go back into my path of least resistance, aka managing and whatever, then all of a sudden you're no longer in growth mode, right?
Yeah. And because that feels really safe, I'm guessing, for a lot of people. That's their bread and butter. That's what they feel they're best at. And we should also be really clear, for people that are in this space, it tends to also be where they feel their highest level of importance. That's how they get their feeling of self-importance, as Dale Carnegie would say. People raise their hand and go, ow, ow, ow. And they go, I can fix that. And they fix it. And people go, thank you. And that's how they get their feeling of importance.
Yeah.
And to step outside of that into the exact opposite, which is where people go, ow, ow, ow. And they go, I can fix it. They go, no, thank you. Or you're too expensive. Or then they ghost you. It's like it's the literal opposite of how they've built that identity.
Right.
So that's got to be a part of it. But I think it's also important to understand that a lot of us are chasing something we don't really want. The world, a lot of business advice, especially here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where private equity is, I could throw a rock and find someone who runs a venture capital fund. It's like, right, I'm here. It's Silicon Valley. If you're going to start an MSP, everybody tells you, cool, grow it to this, grow it to this, grow it to this, get your multiple. Maybe get your second exit with the private equity roll up. And that's the only path, or the real path, to success. And there's another person in my network who runs an MSP who hired a CEO. I don't know what his exact revenue is, but he ran it for years. It's a profitable business. He hired a CEO, and now he's the office manager and just hangs around the office and washes coffee cups and makes sure everyone's got a great attitude. And the CEO is responsible for generating new business and running the business and account management and all these things. And the profits of the business still go to the office manager, not to the CEO. there's a lifestyle component to a lot of this that would be far more comfortable than growth.
Yeah.
But I think the world just cheaps. Everybody is saying grow, 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 sell. Get your multiple, get your exit, do something like that.
Sure.
As if it's the only way to be successful. I think it's really dangerous.
Yeah, it's a good perspective for somebody who's listening to this going, well, I want to grow, but I also want to grow on my terms. Like, I don't want to take a big plunge. I don't want to take an SBA loan, hire 6 people and like work my ass off and hope that I'm in the black by the time we're out of cash. They might not want to have that life. They might not want to lose the hair that comes with a journey like that. But even still, the question becomes, okay, growth is still on the other side of discomfort, regardless of the type of growth that you want. And you can do it in a way that feels good, to plug my own brand, but it's like, it's still got to hurt so good. You know what I mean? It's everything requires effort. It's not like there's no version of this where you spend no money, you spend 0 effort, and then you just have a more profitable business. That doesn't exist.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that I wish I could, I'm choosing to try and make a bigger part of my life. But one of our core values, which I wholesale stole from the company I worked for, is progress over comfort. And it's something I'm teaching to my kids. I got 3 kids and I'm teaching them. It's, comfort it's the opposite of progress in many cases. And so the other version of that is choose your hard. It's hard to grow a business. It's hard to have the risk and the fear and all the identity stuff and do the difficult things of growing a business. But it's also really hard bouncing checks and having employees quit because you can't make payroll. It's really hard to have to lay off people that have dedicated a substantial amount of their time to growing your business that you couldn't keep alive. There's the hard of the pain of having to close down the thing that you couldn't make work. Like, that's painful too. It's just, it comes after the inciting incident. It's like pre-pain versus post-pain. To put it in the most obvious, you can eat right and exercise now, and that's hard. I know I'm trying to do that more these days. That's hard. And I'm giving up the comfort of now. But what I'm picking up is having, I'm being able to walk in my 70s as opposed to being wheelchair bound, which it's really hard to want things that are far off in the future, even if they're better. Like, if I had to choose one today, of course I would not choose the wheelchair. But when I sit down after dinner and I want to watch a movie instead of go to the gym, that's really easy to do with almost no immediate negative consequences. Yeah. And so blowing off the sales activity is comfortable, super easy with almost no immediate consequence.
Right. And was it John Mulaney who said, like, when it comes to instant gratification, canceling plans is like heroin?
Oh, yeah. It's like the adults. Oh, it's even as what I consider to be I think I'm a pretty good sales pro. Even today in the MSP dojo, I'll be in the waiting room for a sales meeting and the guy won't show up. And I have a little tiny bit of, I get my time back.
Yeah. Oh, sweet. I'm going to go play Mario Kart or something.
I can just turn it off and I'm going to, I better check Reddit while I wait for him to arrive for 10 minutes or so. Just make sure that, make sure I don't miss him. It is prevalent. It absolutely, it's not like we have, that never happens to us. Like, it's the exact same function that everyone else is struggling with.
Yeah. Even guys like me who are like kind of weird anomalies who are like sort of addicted to, like, I don't know, growth. Like, I'm kind of addicted to discomfort in a weird way. Like, it's just a big part of my personality is I'm like obsessed with the future to the point where I don't even really sometimes know how to be present, because I'm like, what's the point? Like, the present is fleeting. The future is now, Yeah. And so sometimes it's hard for me to be present with somebody because I'm looking at them, thinking about all the things they could become, And so, but even in my disposition, like, I don't like cold calling. I don't want to do it anymore. But guess what? Sometimes I freaking do it anyway, and I make tons of cash because I did it. And I'll say it another way. Even if you're in great shape, even bodybuilders, it hurts them to lift heavy weight. It still hurts. It's still just as difficult. But their relationship with pain is what has created the habits that have gotten them the results. That's the difference between somebody who's a jacked bodybuilder in the gym and a guy, a noodle-armed guy like me who's in the gym. they both experience the same amount of pain,
Mhm.
but the way that they decide, the relationship they decide to form with pain will determine whether or not they come back in 2 days. And maybe that's something to explore further here with like the clients that the MSPs we've
Mhm.
engaged, is what does it look like for them to potentially just change their frame of mind around the pain and the discomfort of that growth.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to do that right now because it reminds me of like this idea, the difference between pain and discomfort, or pain and strong sensations. So my wife, hey babe, can I share this? Cool, thanks. She's nowhere near here. We're just going to say it anyways. So she natural childbirths for the 2 childbirths she did, and we used the Bradley method, which required literally 4 months of training for her and like a month and a half of training for me, with all the ways that I was going to help her. And the premise of it is that pain, like most of labor, is not actually painful. Certain parts of it are, but especially the leading up to it, like contractions, are just muscles flexing. It's just very uncomfortable. It's extremely uncomfortable. Now, I haven't gone through any of this, but my wife, after the first one, believed it so much we did it again the same way. So she twice refused an epidural, like for preference. But I remember she was so dedicated to the process, and I was such a good coach, if I don't toot my own horn. Both times she went to the hospital, they didn't believe she was ready to have a baby, to the point where I had to scream at the doctor. Well, actually, we've never had a baby delivered by a doctor. It was always by nurses, because they wouldn't even go get the doctor. But like, I'm literally screaming at them, she is pushing, and they go, okay. And they look, and there's a baby popping out, because she was so calm, and she was able to really manifest this idea of, or personify this idea that my body isn't broken. This isn't wrong. This is what it's supposed to do. It just is very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
For like the most part of it. And so that blows my mind. But there's a version of that for what we're doing. You say you got addicted to the pain of growth. I don't think that's true. I think you've learned how to recognize pain is burnout. Pain is hanging from your thumbs. Yeah, you can hang from your thumbs for 3 days, but that's not the same thing as discomfort. That's hurting you. Whereas the discomfort, going to the gym and bodybuilding, is discomfort. It's you're causing intentional, you're accepting intentional discomfort for the gain that comes with it. And so like, I think a lot of people, they've synonymized the discomfort of doing the things, and then to them it is pain. But figuring out how to separate those two things and go like, wow, this sucks. It's not fun. I don't like it, but it's building, not tearing down.
Yes, it's building and not right. And the way to distinguish between the pain and discomfort is, what is the fruit of the activity? Like, you always judge a tree by its fruit, right? So like, what do I get out of this? The experience in the gym, the fruit of that is strength. So that's how you know that's not pain, that's discomfort.
And just like the gym, you can overdo it and experience pain. And one of the measures is you can't go and do it again next week or the next day.
Right.
Sales is the same way. If you roll in, if you like spend a hard week of burn the candle at both ends in sales, and then you step into the weekend and it doesn't help you recover enough for the Monday, like that might be pain. But if you walk into the weekend exhausted and you can come back to it Monday, maybe that was just discomfort.
Right. I don't know if we have, I don't know if this is a rabbit trail or not, but because there's an additional layer on here. Sometimes people will do the activity, but with a motivation that makes it unsustainable. So like someday I'll do a whole episode all about shame-based growth. We had a conversation the other day, Robert.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But like, basically I had to make the most calls. I made the most calls every day of everybody in my hiring class at my sales job. And it wasn't even necessarily because I wanted it the most. It's because I couldn't cope with myself if I was anything but the best. There was a lot of look in the mirror saying, you are a piece of crap if you don't do this. And then I would do it, but it was strenuous, right? And then it's like, I'm not any better off having done that. Yeah, I got the activity, but that's like, you know, lifting a weight just to get the weight in the air. That's how you get hurt, not how you get stronger. Versus there are other motivators that you have to eventually find and replace. All of this is like, if you have a flatlined business and you want to grow and you're serious about hitting new sales goals, these things we're talking about this is required reading, right? Like, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, but like, you can't work with a sales coach and get serious results without facing discomfort.
I totally agree. And I have a firm belief, and this is the MSP dojo again, every MSP needs a black belt. Someone has to be responsible for growing the business. This has to be somebody's job. It's not going to happen by accident. And in the same way that this is my joke that if I tell people all the time, it's like, if you hire a cold caller and you give them any other job, or if you hire someone in sales, you say your job is to grow revenue, new client revenue, and you give them literally any other job, they'll do that first. If you tell them your job is to go to this networking event, go to 5 networking events, or make 100 cold calls, or send out mailers, go get us new revenue. But also, I kind of need you to clean the bathrooms with your own toothbrush. They're going to wake up in the morning and go, okay, I better get the bathrooms out of the way. Like, it's just the way it works. You know, I don't know what it is about that, but it's just the way it works. And so this has to be somebody's job. They have to be held accountable to it. And that person has to come to accept this is going to be uncomfortable, but it's worth it. And if it does cross over into painful, a good coach can help you through that. The right program will help you through that. Yeah. But be coming to the point where you say, like, this is going to be difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'm never going to love it, but I might love the results from it over time.
Yeah. And frankly, again, your relationship with the experience is sort of up to you. That's a perspective that you get to define. So you can say, absolutely, I got to go to work every day versus, oh, I get to go to work today. Those are the same, like, both people will work the same amount of hours on the calendar, but for one of them, it will feel very different than the other. And it's the same with growing your business. You can just sit here and continue to whine about how hard it is. And you know what? It is hard. So that excuse is valid enough. And the question becomes, what do you want? Do you want results, or do you want to be right?
Choose
right
your heart,
now,
man.
Yeah, you can't have both of those things, right? Like, you can either be right or you can get results. And you know, this is two coaches talking with their filters off. So like, normally we're
nice. We wrap it in a hug, right?
But yeah, we normally wrap it in a hug for sure. But there's a lot of that with me. That's like, I don't know. I have a hard time sympathizing with people who refuse to give up control of their life and yet also refuse to take responsibility for their shortcomings.
Yeah.
If you want to be the man, you have to be the man. That was my motto at 18. It was like, I want everybody to look up to me at work. And that means when they need a shift covered, I have to take it. I will never achieve what I want, which is I want people to think I'm the man if I don't behave like a man. And the end. And that for me was enough to sort of get me out of the hump of the instant gratification of doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah. So the MSP dojo, again, really, people are encouraging me, like, lean hard into the martial arts aspect of it. Like, you should have guys like flipping each other off of tables and stuff on your main thing. And you know, they may or may not be right, but I had this thing where it's like, well, IT guys, they're not into martial arts. You know, they don't do martial arts. They don't do fitness. They don't connect with that. But the more I've spent time in the community, the more I've realized successful MSP owners, they do understand that. They may not actually take a martial art, but I was really surprised how many of my dojo members have tournaments on Saturday for martial arts they're engaged in. It was far more than I thought it would be. But the interesting thing is the MSPs that tend to be successful, even moderately successful, or even continuing to become successful, tend to be run by individuals that understand the nature of discomfort and its value. I don't know a lot of MSPs that are successful that haven't had to go through a discomfort phase. Now, it's not always going to be uncomfortable, especially if you find yourself in the position of that MSP where he's the office manager now. He's outsourced that discomfort to a guy, but he had to go through the discomfort first. And when his CEO is having a hard time, who does he come to talk about his discomfort? So he simply delegated it down. It's not like it's gone away. I just don't know how to grow anything meaningful. I don't know how to do anything meaningful that's super easy.
Yeah. That's the quote right there. Let's do this, Robert. Let's rapid fire a couple of, just so that we're above reproach on the question of if this is helpful. um, Let me rapid fire a couple of like scenarios / objections / some of these like static behaviors. And I'd love to hear just as tangible of a result as you can think of, preferably something you've seen in the field that somebody who's experiencing this or who is in this mindset can do.
Okay. I think I understand the premise. Let's do it.
The premise is we've got an owner-led sales MSP, and they are terrified of knocking on doors or calling strangers. They're terrified of doing it, but they can't afford marketing. What's a piece of advice you've got for them?
Yeah. First of all, ask what's the worst that could happen. Try and envision the absolute worst thing that could reasonably happen. And then figure out if that's really, the probability of it actually happening. Like you could knock on the door and they could shoot you. Okay, well, California, that's probably not going to happen. I don't know about some of these other places, but it's just, so visualize the worst thing that could happen and then you rob it of its power. And the second thing is go with a friend, man. I promise you, every single MSP owner that's listening to this or MSP salesperson has someone else in their network that also wants to meet that same business. Go grab a coffee and do it 2 at a time.
Nice. Okay, that's amazing. How about they want to sell something and they're very afraid. There's other bids out there and they're really afraid of being the most expensive because they don't know how to come back. And so they're stuck in the dilemma of, I want to send a quote, but I'm worried I'm going to be the most money. What do you do when you're stuck in that paralysis?
You lean in hard. If you know you're going to be the most, don't be the most by 10 cents. Be the most by 10%. Then that causes the conversation for people to go like, well, hey, did you understand the bid? And you go, yeah, I did. I maybe am the only one who did. And then you help them understand why you were charging that. And at least you're not going to get qualified for, being the highest. It at least creates the conversation.
Okay. An MSP is paying for a marketing or sales service and they have not used it or shown up in many months and they're paying and paying and paying. And now they're embarrassed and they want to get back in, but it feels uncomfortable to even go back and face the fact that they've done nothing for 3 months. What do they do?
Got it. So I would read the blog on the Email Forgiveness Day, which is something that some guys, I think from a podcast started once. They created a day where you could just respond to an email you should have responded to a way long time ago with just the link to that blog article and then the response that you would have done if you'd gotten to it on time. There's a version of that in what we're doing, and it's just show up. Just show up and pretend like nothing happened. I once called a prospect for 6 months every Friday because he was an absolute whale of a prospect. For 6 months, I called him every single Friday and left a message as if it was the first one. And in month 6, he called me back as if it was the first one. He booked an appointment and eventually bought.
So you pull a George Costanza where he embarrassingly quits and then he realizes he couldn't afford it. And the next day he walks back in as if he didn't quit and keeps his job.
It's only weird if you make it weird.
Right. Amazing. Robert, any other things that somebody who's maybe they're stuck, maybe they're like, I don't know, I want to do something, but I can't figure out how to change my relationship with discomfort, or I don't know what to do next. I mean, what would you say to them?
Well, they should reach out to you or me, but realistically, there's nobody in this world that does hard things alone. Nobody makes it alone. It's a myth. The self-made billionaire is a myth. It's fake. Everybody has had people help them. You need to find someone you're willing to share that with in vulnerability and tell them exactly what's going on, even if you don't understand it. And then they will help you if they're good people. They will help you figure out a path forward. And if you tell someone and they're useless, tell someone else. No one goes through this alone. No one fixes it alone. Find someone whose voice you like and you trust, and then tell them.
And I'd even add to that and say growth and discomfort is not easy for anybody. They make it look easy. People who hide their pain are doing so because they're afraid of what you think of them, not because they're bulletproof. The MSPs who are in your network who go, I grew up to $1 billion in 5 seconds. They didn't, or they did and they have no clue how they did, and therefore they're not willing to really open up about it because they feel like an imposter.
No, I'm gonna back that up. In the dojo, people will be like, well, I don't want to give my silver bullets because I don't want my competitors to. And every single person that I've convinced to do that, they found out their silver bullets are not very useful. and it's just hilarious to me that people think that they somehow have got something that they don't want their competitors to hear because it'll undercut their success. It's a lie. It's a lie and a joke. And I'm sorry, guys. You don't have one. I haven't seen one yet. I've been doing this a long time. I haven't seen one yet.
No,
So,
it's in the creative world, like in Hollywood, it's the kind of people who they'd work on something for a long time, and then 15 minutes before the meeting, they'd rewrite it to be like, well, I had a surge of inspiration, and so, hey, this is kind of rough, and so they give themselves an out for why it's not going to be up to someone else's standard before the other person has even had a chance to assess or engage with the creative itself. So they just like constantly self-sabotage. It's the same exact mindset. Like I've often said that everybody in the world either has imposter syndrome or they're a narcissist. And there's we're all on a spectrum, and there's kind of nothing in between though. Like, everybody is a little bit afraid that everybody else is better than them. And that is the human condition. Right? That's not a character flaw. That's the human condition. And we cannot let the human condition stop us from living the life that we want to live.
Because you're still going to have to live a life. You're still going to have to be a human, and I think a lot of the challenges that people think they're the only one. They think I'm the only one that has to deal with this. I'm alone in my misery. And it's just stupid. It's a lie. It's a lie. Just find someone you can talk this through with. Look, and let's also here's the PSA. Look, I'm a 41-year-old man. Nobody ever taught me to manage my emotions. I just learned how to shove them real deep for a long time until I had to do the sales job full time and they bubbled out. And it's just like, this is one of these things we're going to have to grab with both hands and figure out, really without the tools to do it, because no one gave them to us. So you got to figure out how to work your way through this. For every single MSP owner I've met that is underperforming in sales, it isn't tactics. It just isn't. That's not the big thing. The joke is there's 3 levers you can pull on. Am I doing this well? Am I doing the right thing? And am I doing enough of it? And almost every single one I talk to, the very first thing is you're just not doing enough of it. Start there, and then we can quantify which one of those other ones you need to pull on. But so many of them just don't do enough of it.
It's so good. It's so good, man. This is great. I mean, I could keep going, but I feel like we got plenty here.
This is already a pretty long podcast. We'll have to do like a second episode or something. Yeah,
we should do another one of these where we just like dive into we should do like a sales inner work episode, like how to be the problem and be okay with it, Anyway.
Own your mess. I don't know, something like that. We'll figure it out. We'll get a good ChatGPT will give us a good title. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, this whole thing has been an AI deepfake. I'm not even really here. So
it glitches and you're gone.
Yeah. If they want to get a hold of you, what's a good way? Want to learn more about you?
My LinkedIn, mspdojo.net.
Cool. We'll stick you in the show notes, and if you like what Robert's doing, there you go.
Thank you for having me on the show. This was a blast.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for talking about this. I've got a strong suspicion that people are going to find it helpful. So appreciate you being on. Everybody, just thanks so much for listening to Robert and I kind of gab about some of the things that are less fun to think about, but guarantee have some of the most weight in determining whether or not you will find sales success. So we'll see you at the next episode.